Good morning and good evening to everyone from all parts of the world who have registered for the webinar, which we are having today. Hope my voice is audible. Can anyone, Jessica, let me know? Oh, great. Thank you. So, hope everyone who has joined us are doing safe in their COVID times along with their family. Our best wishes are all with you. Now to begin let me introduce myself and the company to you. So my name is Nitin Naveen and I am the Vice President Innovation and Strategy at AI CoreSpot. I'll be your host for the day. I have been also joined by my colleague, Arvind is there, and Naveen, who is at the backstage and who will be assisting me in keeping the event lively and resolving any technical glitches if it comes in between. So thanks a lot to them for putting in hard work and making this one a success. That is a huge success because to gather a great set of speakers is a great task which they have done. We'll also try to provide a seamless experience to all of you so that you can gain maximum output out of this. From AI CoreSpot front, I'll provide you a brief insight who we are and how we started. So we started this year and are gaining momentum as the time is tickling. Our aim is to number one AI-driven community in the coming years, so that like-minded people like you all can be a part of the same in supporting, growing, and making it a success. Our mission is to serve as a hub for the information regarding Industry 4.0 technologies, which includes AI, ML, deep learning, robotics, blockchain, IoT, drone, 5G, edge AI, digital twin, AR, VR, cloud, and so on. We'll continue to do industry-backed webinars and hybrid events. The knowledge repository obviously will be made from the reliable data through which we'll get through the industry leaders, subject matter experts, and the thought leaders. We'll enrich the content through digital content, newsletter, podcasts, videos, blogs, to shed light on this ever-evolving industry. Request all of you who is present here to go through our website, that is aicorespot.io, for further updates. Also, please like our social media handles, which will keep you all updated on everything what we propose to offer in the coming months to follow. In this month alone, we have a mega half-day virtual event on cybersecurity that is happening on October 29 with 15 great industry leaders. So do not miss to attend that too. We'll send the link to everyone who have registered. Further, there are lots more in store for subsequent months as well, with focus on telecom, IoT, blockchain, healthcare, retail, e-commerce, banking, and the list goes on. So keep on connecting with us and request all of you to be with us and enjoy the learning. Now the webinar which is happening today. So it's an important panel discussion which will focus on how emerging technologies like AI is transforming the future of cybersecurity. So before starting with the day, I would like to highlight few things so that it can set up the tone for the day and make it a very, very interesting, amazing learning networking day for all of you. A special mention to our technology partner, that is Digit7, who has helped us in understanding our vision and supporting us to create a platform like this through which we can help achieve our objectives. Their support is immense and we are there because of them. So some introduction about Digit7 to everyone. So Digit7 has a clear philosophy that innovation is the main success for them. Direction fills them with purpose and purpose provides structure. So the visionaries at Digit7 understood this a quarter of a century ago, and they have ever since provided organizations with the strategic objectives, innovation roadmaps that they need to forge their futures. Innovation is the name and disruption is their address. So they create paradigm shifts in organizations with some intuitive technologies, equipping firms to endure accelerating change. Their products are Smart Express Store, e-commerce, grab and go, Edge POS, admin store management, Smart AR, delivery pickup apps, digital wallet, drone scan. They also have a blockchain-based supply chain management. Label Monkey is there, Data Mink is there, and digital twins. So these are the few products which they have. They have recently acquired a cybersecurity company as well. And about their services, they are into product engineering, innovation as a service, digital transformation, customer experiences, and innovative design. So you can go through their website, that is www.digit7.io, and understand more in depth. Also, thanks to all our community partners for today, which includes InfoVision, Baker McKenzie, Bernard Institute for Cybersecurity, Marco Cloud, and Bug Crowd, to make this event a success. A special mention to all the speakers, that is a great 4 speakers who is present today. and attendees who have taken their time to register for the event and came today to achieve their objectives through this forum. At the end of the day, obviously, our main thing is if you gain a few things and network with each other, gain understanding, gain more knowledge out of this forum, our core objectives will be achieved as a company. Further, the last important thing which I want to highlight before I hand it over to Jessica is if you have any questions, there's a Q&A section which is there in the right side of the menu option. So you can type in as and when the panel member discusses, and we'll try to get it answered during the discussion or at the end as per the time permitted. But feel free to write the questions there. It's very important. There's also a hand button at the bottom of the screen, which everybody of you have. So when you will click on that, that is, we can raise the hand and come to the stage also. Like you can see here, we are on stage. So you can ask the question to speakers within a video format as well. So before moving on and giving the stage to Jessica, I'll hand over and I'll just let you all know that she's the moderator for the event and she will take the briefings along with Mark, Marco, and Arti so that they can take the panel discussion forward. Over to Jessica.
Thanks so much, Nitin. I really appreciate that introduction. And I'm going to actually pass it over to some of my esteemed co-panelists today to talk, to introduce themselves, and then we can get started. So maybe we can start with you, Mark Bernard. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you can bring to the topic today.
Mark Bernard, and I'm here from the Bernard Institute for Cybersecurity Excellence. I've been working in the technology space for about 30 years now. Cut my teeth on the AS400, which was one of the first servers to actually use level 1 and level 2 artificial intelligence to resolve problems without any human intervention. So AI has been around for a long time, and of course it's getting better and better, and there's a lot of more interest in it these days. So I'm here to contribute in any way I can based on my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. How about you, Arti? Tell us about yourself and what you bring to the topic.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for inviting me, and greetings to everyone wherever you are in the world. So I like to start off with my greeting, which is Jambo, Namaste, Konnichiwa, Bonjour, and hello to everyone. My name's Arti, and my network knows me as a change agent. And for me, my purpose has been to be a voice, and I've dedicated my entire career to breaking down barriers and boundaries for underrepresented groups in STEM and in leadership. I joined cybersecurity once when I moved over here to Canada, and ever since I've just been a big champion for diversity in our industry. Started up Stand Out to Lead, as well as being on boards with WSIS Western Canada, as well as with the OWASP local chapter, and recently was appointed as a board advisor at Observe ID, which is a leader in identity security for multi-cloud, multi-hybrid environments. And proud to share both boards have a 50% representation on the board. Currently work for BugCrowd, and what I'm going to be bringing to the table is just what I've seen in my journey in being at cybersecurity companies and the adoption of AI within the products. Outside of work, I enjoy cooking, I enjoy riding my motorcycle, and being based in Vancouver, it's early in the morning, so glad to be here.
Great to have you. And Arti's a little humble. She didn't mention that she's one of the top 20 cybersecurity women in Canada. So we're very lucky to have you here with us. And I was excited to see your pictures on the motorcycle when I was prepping for the panel. So it's a great group of speakers. And we're also joined by Marco Sluga. Can you tell us about yourself, Marco?
Thank you, Jessica. So my name is Marco. I'm a cloud consultant and instructor. So most of my time is spent teaching people how to utilize cloud. One of those areas is machine learning and AI. I am certified. I have a certification from AWS in machine learning. I also work a lot with things like data analytics and cybersecurity. And AI, machine learning, and cybersecurity are coming together in a way where they're empowering companies and individuals to protect themselves way better than it's possible to do that with traditional ways. So I'm here sort of to give an overview of the cloud portion of it, the new technology side, and of course, any kind of insight from my 20 years experience in the field.
Wonderful. I'm so excited for today. So let me just say briefly that I am a partner at the global law firm Baker McKenzie in the government enforcement practice. I'm located in San Francisco, so it is early in the morning here, just as it is in Vancouver. I focus my practice on government enforcement in cybersecurity cases, including DOJ, SEC, OFAC, and so forth. And I'm very happy to be part of Baker McKenzie's Chambers Band 1 rated privacy and security team. So I don't know as much as you all do about AI, so I'm excited to learn this morning. Maybe we can start with Arti. Arti, can you talk to us a little bit about the history of AI and cybersecurity and how it's evolved over time?
Absolutely. So I can share from my journey in terms of the organizations I've worked at and what I've seen in their adoption. And I've worked for, when I first moved to Canada, I worked for several endpoint security companies. And back, like 20 years ago, everyone knew about signature-based detection and the pain users experienced during signature updates. And I saw the trends as companies started evolving because we needed to get ahead of try to close the gap between us and the adversary. Signature updates became larger and frequent, then vendors started a different approach, which is lighter and smaller signatures. And then from there, the new buzzword was heuristics and behavior-based scanning engines and techniques. And, back to the biggest challenge is still, how do we close the gap between us and the adversary, especially as we're faced with limited resources? And today, especially today, due to the pandemic, many companies are accelerating their digital transformation. We've seen a rise in the breaches as a result as well. We've seen the perimeter expand due to remote workforce, and of course, the threat landscape has significantly increased. And due to the limited resources, time is and will always be our enemy. And due to the development of new threats, I saw in the endpoint security phase or stage, is the signature-based detection was not effective, right? And about 7 or 8 years ago, I remember I started hearing a little bit more about fileless malware protection. I started hearing about machine learning, adopted within endpoint security solutions. And that's where I saw next generation endpoint vendors started taking the lead in adopting machine learning, where the engine would learn to identify malicious behavior and activities based on attributes from previous malicious files. At that time, actually, vendors were still learning. And in fact, I still remember selling against this technique because we were yet to see the benefits. Soon, companies began to understand the benefits, such as improving speed, accuracy in detection, reducing response times, and improving signal-to-noise ratio. At that time, people saw this as a hype, but as time went by, slowly, the industry started seeing the benefits and began adopting machine learning as one of their techniques.
Great, thanks so much. And Mark, can you take us to the present? Can you kind of give us a little overview of some of the different ways that AI can be employed in cybersecurity?
Okay, so AI is, in my opinion, it's not quite here yet, to be honest with you. So we're still going through, I think, a lot of the machine learning stages before we can have like a positronic brain or a quantum computer that can actually process AI. I think there's a lot of challenges currently right now. If I quoted Elon Musk, he would say, AI is probably not going to be here until like 2025 or 2026. But there will be lots of challenges because what happens when we have, different groups, different governments, whether it's the Communist Party of China or the United States or the UK or Europe developing their own AI, and how will these AIs interact with each other? When you think of it from a business level, from developing software, we're not talking about the same thing. AI is completely different, right? So AI is something that can actually execute some kind of a process or a task based on what it's been seeing. And so there's a lot of questions, I think, around this. Also, some of the things that I have seen from machine learning, and is that a lot of times legitimate business can also be blocked. So there's a positive side to having AI manage cybersecurity. from a defense in depth or a network perspective or intrusion. But how do you prevent it from blocking legitimate business? Because if you're a startup in the U.S., and this is where I've seen this, right, and you have people contacting your sales department or contacting other people with brochures or some kind of glossy, the first thing that the system thinks is that this is a phishing attack, right? So it blocks it, right? So you have to have some way to really be able to identify those. And I don't think that's quite here, but certainly AI will help. The big thing that AI is going to do is, of course, is help remove all of the sort of the day-to-day activity like you see in the security operations centers, where you have people monitoring systems and monitoring networks and then taking some kind of a responsive action or a corrective action in order to investigate an incident or potential incident. So I think those type of sort of mundane activities you're going to see are going to be eliminated. And then you're going to have more higher level activities for humans to get involved while the AI kind of correlates and does the day-to-day stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really important to know what the limitations are and what the right terminology is. So I guess I'll put it to you, Marco, given your background in machine learning. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about some of the applications you're seeing for machine learning in terms of what Mark has described, just trying to stay on top of so much data that a human could never really, could never hope to be on top of it all?
Well, yeah, that's the idea of machine learning, is essentially capturing that data and finding patterns that are hidden inside of that data that would not be available through traditional analytical approaches. And this is where it ties into what Artie was saying, that the pattern matching approach that was in place, let's say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, that pattern matching approach can be, easily defeated by a smart attacker. So what AI brings into cybersecurity is actually that decision-making component, which Mark says AI is not there. I disagree with that. I think AI is there. There is a certain level of intelligence. There isn't autonomous intelligence comparable to humans. However, there is a certain level of intelligence that is in sort of some ways incomprehensible to humans. How that decision is made, there's definitely platforms, there's services, there are ways to create those environments where you don't need a network operating center anymore to watch over the patterns of your traffic and any kind of errors in your logs. There is AI that can actually take that in, perform analytics, and evolve over time and reduce the amount of false positives. The first scenario where we saw AI beat humans was ImageNet, ResNet, where it identifies images in more than 95% of the time correctly, whereas humans actually do not, on average, beat 95% image identification. And this is happening inside of cybersecurity as well. There are services out there, there are systems out there that are available, one-click install services that are available, which can go into your environment, take all the logs that are available to them, and do advanced pattern analytics, advanced matching of whether this is even a potential attack, and block it. So there is very little human intervention required. And this is AI. Yeah, it's not a human. It's not going to be making decisions for your business yet, but it is a form of intelligence, right? I mean, an ant has a form of intelligence, right? Because it can, match the pattern of the chemicals on the floor and follow it and go to a little grain of sugar and bring it back to the nest, right? That is a form of intelligence. It's a very, very low level of intelligence, but this is essentially where our AI is. It's little ants that do little tasks across the network and make small little tiny decisions. And when you put them all together, it works.
That's so fascinating, the ant analogy. It's important to think through kind of, we're basically at a teenage level maybe, or even below that, right? If we're talking about ants. And we're looking at 2025 before we're going to have something closer to a child, perhaps. One of mine downstairs about to burst in here. Question for you, Arti. How is machine learning, AI, or whichever term you choose to use, can it be applicable for crowdsourced cybersecurity? I know that's one of the areas that you're very active in.
Yes, absolutely. Just in crowdsourced organizations out there, with the organization I work at BugCrowd, we do use machine learning. And just looking in that, over the last 15 months during this pandemic, we saw a huge increase in the number of researchers submitting vulnerabilities on our platform for our teams to triage. So whether it's because individuals lost their jobs, and that's why we saw an increase, but reality is the perimeter had expanded with a remote workforce, and we just saw a huge number that was being submitted to our teams. And to be able to process this data from the submissions by our researchers, which are the ethical hackers on our platform, we either needed to hire more staff, or figure a better way, right, to process this fast enough, right, especially given the situation, right. We adopted machine learning to help automate our processes by helping us reduce the need to review duplicate submissions that our teams were manually triaging. We're able to process large amounts of data in real time, and by doing this, what we're doing is shorten the time, narrowing the risks for our clients. So in other words, the sooner they can get access to a vulnerability that we've triaged, the sooner the developers of our clients can fix the issue, and the shorter window for the attackers, right? Because, you give them more time, there's more risk, more vulnerabilities, right? So every second counts in our world, right? So that's how I've seen that we've been adopting machine learning.
That's really helpful. And Mark, I guess I'm interested in your view, since you're sort of saying it's a little young, we can't really depend on it too much. Is there hype out there? Is AI just really at this point? How do you cut through the sales pitches and know what is really possible in this space?
Well, I think unless it get past the Turing test, then it's not AI, right? So we're still at the very, very infancy, I think is a good way to describe it. Ants are actually probably more intelligent than AI right now. So, but that said, we're here to talk about the future of AI, and I think it's very bright. I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered about AI, as I mentioned before, like what happens when two AIs conflict with each other or interact with each other. Which one has the predominance, and what happens when AI discovers that the worst secret of all is that the weakest link in the chain are the humans. So what happens when AI discovers that and decides, oh, maybe it's time to remove that? and what if AI learns how to self-replicate and self-heal? I mean, it probably will, because there's a lot of technology in the nanotechnology world that is learning to do that with graphene and stuff, different types of materials. AI will probably learn about this because it's on a database somewhere, and AI is going to be, probably scanning the internet and learning about everything that it can get its hands on. So what are going to be the rules around that? There's so much opportunity here, and it's pretty exciting when it does happen, but we need to be able to manage this, or else it could be the end of us.
Sounds like a sci-fi movie. Certainly something to be a little nervous about, for sure, when the ants become our overlords. I guess as a practical matter, Marco, could you kind of walk us through sort of what, if you're a privacy professional and you're interested in employing machine learning to help your cybersecurity defenses in your company, what are some things you should be aware of? What should you be thinking about?
Well, the first thing that I recommend to all my clients is to start educating themselves on what is out there on these technologies. There is a very fast pace of development in ML. There's a very fast pace of development in deep learning. Yes, the theories were put down, 40 years ago. It started becoming feasible to do deep learning, let's say about a decade ago. But now that we have an increase in compute power and we have an increase in also all kinds of development on this in this field, things are accelerating. So first thing, go down to some kind of training path, figure out what the right path is for you. And then once you have a basic understanding of this, you'll also have a much better way of evaluating whether that product or service or feature that you're trying to use is actually right for you. Because a lot of the times that marketing hype, right, it's there, definitely. We got an AI powered, labeling service for all your documents so that you don't need to classify them. Yeah, I believe that you have that, but does it really work? Does it really do what it says on the box? It's going to be very, very difficult to provide some kind of real world test if you don't even understand the underlying technology, right? So some level of understanding of the underlying, what it is, what technology is an important fact. And that is definitely for anybody who's starting in the cybersecurity space, for anybody who's right now thinking, oh, I want to, move into the cybersecurity space, start with a little bit of basic machine learning math, start with a little bit of basic machine learning computing, just to see how it's done. And then when you get into your cybersecurity specialization, you will be able to use that experience way better than just jumping in and, saying, yeah, that's the best product ever out there.
Excellent. And I guess, I'll throw this out to the floor. In my limited attempt to do exactly that and learn more about the different types of machine learning in this space, it looks like there are quite a few different ways that machine learning can be applied to data. I'd be interested in any of your thoughts about kind of which ones we should be focused on more than others. The issue of are we going to what are we exactly asking the machine learning to do here as a practical matter? How are we trying to deploy it?
All right, I'll take that one.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. If we look at the cybersecurity scope, right, you're going to look at things like external attacks, right? That's going to be your focus. If you're looking at external attacks, then you need to correlate different sources of information. Like, for example, your network logs, your logs from your DNS servers, your logs from your application. And then what you're going to ask from ML is to provide you the correlation between those logs so that you can see, okay, does the user that's coming to my website, have they looked up my DNS name at the DNS server, right? How did they get to my website? If they just, found the IP address and just went straight in, nobody remembers IP addresses of websites. We always type www.website.com, right? We don't go to 1.7.18.234, right? And that is one way to discover it, because an attacker is not going to bother if they've got a botnet that's going to attack your website. They're not going to bother resolving each and every IP address of your website, because they're going to do that once and then tell the bots, attack this IP address, right? So that's a really simple way to start figuring out, okay, this could be an attack, right? The person didn't go to my DNS server. And then you look at, okay, what are they doing in my application? Is the pattern of usage something that a typical user would do? Are they trying to download my, image from my website 50 times a second, right? And then you've got other things like network flow logs, where you can see whether there was some rejected requests. Was somebody trying to do some kind of reconnaissance on the network to see whether you have any open ports or any kind of holes in your frameworks and things like that, right? And what you do with the machine learning is you take all of those inputs and you create correlation. You create a model that will have good correlation between these factors, right? But then AI, the AI portion that comes in is making the decision. Is it suspicious? Is it blatantly fraudulent? Or is it something that is, completely normal, completely, or is this user just doing something weird because they're lost on my website, right? And the idea behind AI is that it's not just block or allow, right? AI can make decisions that are much greater than that. AI can make a decision to allow somebody in, to allow them into a certain honeypot scope where they can explore the website, and then we can have additional evaluation, even human evaluation, if that is somebody that's an attacker or is it a real person. And in real time, you can then let them through into your actual application, right? And then on the other hand, you're going to go and you're going to be looking at inside attacks, right? Attacks from the inside actually represent about 80% of all attacks that happen inside of enterprises, right? Because either employees are disgruntled or they're being paid by some kind of industry espionage, scenario, or it's just somebody had their credentials misused, right? And here you're going to look at access logs for who's doing what kind of files are they accessing. You're going to also need to have a good classification policy for your documents, right? And you can do ML for just the classification, because classification is something that we typically do by adding some metadata. We say this document is, internal, this document's top secret. However, maybe the contents are public, or maybe a document's been tagged as public, but the contents, have credit card numbers in them. Of course, you want to have machine learning scanning those documents and deciding, okay, this is actually not correctly tagged, right? And the simplest way of doing that is just have a machine learning scan, compare the contents, compare tags, right? But that can be very, very process intensive. So that's a completely different thing. Anyway, once you've got your labeling in place, once you've got your logs of access and what people are doing, is there suddenly a spike in some kind of downloads? Is that something expected or not, right? Is there suddenly a spike in the numbers of credit cards that are being sent out through a network, exfiltrated through a weird port or something like that? And these patterns, again, are collected by machine learning, correlation matrices are created, and then AI can be put on top to make those decisions, whether to stop that, quarantine that, right? As long as you catch it when it's happening. And having a few false positives, especially if it's for internal purposes, if it's for your own employees, having a few false positives where an internal employee is stopped from doing something and they get a web page saying, hey, stop, this is blocked because contact your admin, whatever, that's not going to hurt your business. What's going to hurt your business is not stopping that.
That makes sense. So let's see, we can use machine learning to help us parse crowdsourced data. We can use machine learning to help us with an intrusion detection mechanism. We can use machine learning to help us with our insider threat detection. What else? Are there other applications that Mark or Arti that you've seen and that it could be potentially even better in the future?
I can see where, just in my use cases, for example, in terms of where we're seeing other places where you can apply machine learning, just even in the pen testing space, for example, to be able to match the right skill set onto a pen test, for example. Right? By having information from our researchers, for example, a lot of background information to be able to know, okay, this individual, this skill set will be great, like in the crowdsource model, this researcher will be the best suited for this program, who's going to be working on, like either a bug bounty program or a pen test, for example. Because at the end of the day, the skill set that you put towards researchers working on a particular program, our customers want to see the best, response, or they want to see the output. They want to see areas that they've never seen before. So what we've seen in BugCrowd is by applying machine learning in matching skill set, for example, that's one area. We've also seen, because while I was in the endpoint space, I also saw the email security space. And I've started seeing companies apply that as well in email to be able to better detect.
So like use of particular phrases and words and things like that would raise alarm. Is that certainly would be helpful from in my in my profession to know, is somebody up to no good within the company, and have some kind of detection of that would be absolutely wonderful. I guess, Mark, you've sort of put a little pause and said, wait a minute, this isn't quite as sophisticated as it could be. We need to take it, a little bit slow. Can you talk to us about some of the risks involved here? Like what if the machine learning gets it wrong and they say, oh, there's no attack here, no problem, and it's actually there's an active attack? I mean, is there a risk of over reliance on a tool that's not quite sophisticated or maybe overhyped?
Yeah, it's possible. I think when I implement a cybersecurity program for an enterprise, whether it's a global enterprise or regional, we take the approach of defense in depth. So there's many different layers with defense in depth. For instance, discovering a company's IP address might be interesting, but if they use natting, you're not going to be able to touch any of the devices inside that network. But my experience from working with IBM, I worked with them on the red team for a couple of years. We never used any of these. We heard earlier about signatures and type of things that get logged and get analyzed, and then all of a sudden a pattern gets mapped and a red flag goes up, right? We never used any of those. There's 60% of known threats and 40% unknown, right? That's the reality of the cyber world. And the 40% are where the red team lives, right? So we know systems engineering, we know network engineering, we know software engineering. We know all the different angles of getting into a system and all their vulnerabilities and exposures. And to be honest with you, a lot of these systems are very flaky. You look at Patch Thursday or Tuesday, whatever, for Microsoft, and you look at Oracle and you look at Unix and Linux, they all have major vulnerabilities that are being patched 0 days. Even Apple, which was almost bulletproof for many years, but until the Chinese got access to the code, then all of a sudden a lot of 0-day vulnerabilities are coming out. Surprise, surprise, right? So these things need to be addressed. So I think one of the things that AI will help, and with the help of machine learning as the basis, of course, is to do something that we talked about a few years when the NIST cybersecurity framework came out, and that was building resilience, right, within the infrastructure. So making the defense in depth more bulletproof. So if we can take care of all the things where we have human errors, such as the maintenance of assets, vulnerability patching, monitoring for any type of activity, whether it's internal or external, if we can get AI to help us with that, that will give us more time freed up to concentrate on the 40% of the things that you're not going to see, because it's going to be low impact kind of espionage coming into the system, probably using known credentials. It may be a vulnerability from the manufacturer, maybe reverse engineering like we saw with the Google a few years ago, coming in reverse through the internet. So those are the types of things that really, the threat hunters who could use AI, right, to help detect things that are just a little bit unusual. And I heard, Artie mention heuristic analysis. So that's another one of the areas, right, where you see, common patterns within the network, and then all of a sudden you see a little bump or a little tweak, and you wonder, what was that? And those are the kinds of things that maybe AI could go and investigate quickly and find out if there is some kind of a connection, if someone is trying to do something. So I think there's a lot of, again, opportunity for machine learning within the cybersecurity space. I'm hoping that it can be, utilized. I see a lot of vendors now consolidating systems. So we have Cisco ASIs, which are trying to, take firewalls and IPS and IDS and build them all into one solution. Yeah. So some of this is kind of creating a single point of failure, in my opinion. But certainly, I think more layers are better. But certainly, with AI behind those layers, makes it even better, right? So.
Great. And Marco, I'm interested in your thoughts about that. I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, the privacy professionals, the folks who are hoping to onboard these solutions need to have the training to be able to triage and figure out how to deploy it and which products to use. And as Mark has explained, we don't want to over rely on one solution. We have to have the whole NIST framework and the people training to keep people from clicking on the wrong links and being spearphished. What are your thoughts on other ways to mitigate some of the risks from using machine learning in the cybersecurity space?
Well, yeah, I mean, the traditional approaches are still valid, right? There's what I like to call the 10-step approach to cybersecurity, right? And step one is educate all your users not to click stupid links, right?
Yeah.
That's like number one. Then there's steps like password protection. There's steps like protection against any kind of encryption attacks, right? Everybody who uses a computer, any operating system, all operating system, whether this is Microsoft Windows, there's an Apple Mac OS, whether it's a Linux operating system, they all now have built-in protection against encryption attacks, right? Nobody can encrypt your computer just by setting one little setting on. But then you'll get a bunch of errors that will go like, this has been blocked, this has been blocked, this has been blocked, and none of your apps will work, right? So people don't do it because it blocks it, right? And this is where we need to put AI in place, right? And one thing like zero-day attacks, right? Zero-day attacks is a very, very hard field to manage, right? Because it's an unknown attack, it's being executed, and here is where ML can come into play, right? Pattern matching, doing these deeper insights that are just not visible through the patterns, through the access patterns, right? A zero-day attack will be something unusual, will be something completely out of your ordinary scope. And if the machine learning platform learns what your regular traffic looks like, any zero-day attack will look like something unusual. Any zero-day will be that little pop on the network that you need to analyze, right? And of course, you can go ahead and do a manual action on that. However, putting AI in place is like stopping it and saying, whoa, this is an unusual action, right? And this is where companies like, for example, Privity, they're a small startup that do exactly that. They will actually implement some machine learning on your traffic to say, this is your regular traffic and this is your regular pattern. And anything beyond that scope is a potential issue, right? And they take it, there's plenty other companies out there. There's plenty other service providers out there. It's not replacing everything in one solution. It's building your traditional chain of defense with your web application firewalls, with your port-based firewalls, with your enterprise, pattern matching firewalls, with scaling so that you can absorb an attack when it happens, right? So even if the attacker gets through, the point is to keep your application online, to keep your web presence, to keep your external facing presence alive, right? Look at what happens when big businesses like Facebook, right? It was down for 5 hours. The world stopped, right? For 5 hours and the world stopped, right? Same thing happened to Microsoft last year, right? They messed up a DNS update and brought all the databases for 12 hours down in a couple of regions out here in North America, right? So this is something that you need to protect from. It's not just essentially an attacker, that 40%, right? It's also things that happen that are completely your own fault that you need to protect yourself from, right? So machine learning can come and stop us making errors. It can detect way better than humans can detect. It can find patterns that are not visible to humans. And AI essentially is the one that will make the decision. And at some point, yeah, I agree. We won't know what it does. At some point, it will self-replicate. At some point, this is we can't even understand how animals think. We can't even understand how humans think. And we think we're going to be able to understand an artificially created intelligence. We will not understand it. It doesn't matter what kind of technology it runs on. We do not have the mental capacity to understand it, to constrain it, right? So there's a whole philosophical approach of what we need to do as a society to be able to, accept AI into our society. And my personal opinion is that the most important thing that we have to do is we have to move away from a economy-based society. Because if AI becomes so powerful that it's more intelligent than us, then it'll look at our society and say, oh, all I need to do is take their money away.
Oh, that's pretty. You're giving me nightmares, you guys. This is not. I was hoping more for like the robot CISO by 2050, who never misses anything and gets it all right and keeps us all safe. I want to look on the good side. Turning back to Artie, obviously we can do a lot to try to harden the attack surface, and we can use all the different tools available. But at the end of the day, the human vector is the biggest risk. I was interested in your comment earlier about how we might be able to use machine learning to look at emails and look at certain phraseology and maybe try to stop some of this compromised credentials that keep happening through these, poorly worded emails. They're getting more sophisticated, but have you seen anything like that? Are you excited about that as a potential assistance that we could look to machine learning and AI for? And Artie was logged off to log back in. So maybe Mark, what are your thoughts? I can just throw it to you, given your extensive experience. You probably thought about this. I mean, we can try everything, but people are still, no matter how much training you give, there's always going to be some more sophisticated spear phishing. There's always going to be something that gets somebody to click on it. And then where are we? Can AI or ML help with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, as new attack vectors open up, for instance, if you look, we have lots of knowledge on the different types of frauds that can be committed. And we know that from what's developed over the last 20 years, that a lot of these frauds that used to be done, like identity theft and impersonation and mail theft and stuff like that, have now been converted into the digital world, into the internet. Well, if you look at the list of different types of frauds, there's only like 3 or 4 that have been switched. So there's a wide open, vector for e-crime to take advantage of the digital sphere and come in and attack different businesses or persons or individuals, especially with the recent pandemic that's kept us all at home. We know that the home security systems are nothing like what the corporations and the banks and the governments have been able to implement. So we're kind of vulnerable if they can find us, right? But that's the question, right? If they can find us or not. I think there's a couple other interesting points too that are kind of connected to this, and that is that ties into some of our other discussions, and that is when AI does get used, what kind of data exfiltration will happen? And I don't mean on our part, but by the vendor who's providing the AI. Because my experience with third parties is that they do collect a lot of information about the companies that they work for. So how will that data be recaptured at the end of an agreement or a contract, during the exit process? Will that data be brought back into house, repatriated, if you like? And if there's any personal information involved in that type of transactions that the AI has been helping out with, how much of the personal information will it be collecting? Now, I guess another point is too is that the network, the internet is going dark, right? I don't know if you've noticed or not, but encryption is becoming more and more, and a lot of my customers are now implementing new tools like Gigamon, if you like, to do decryption, encryption, because you can't do deep packet inspection or analysis unless you have the data decrypted. So a lot of times the data comes in and it passes right past a lot of the traditional security systems. It comes right into the user, right? And then it's decrypted. So that's a big risk. And of course, threat agents already know about this. And there's several cases already where threat agents have used encryption to get their malware or their Trojan past the firewall, past the security fence into the organization so that they could execute it and exploit it from the inside. And then supply chain. I don't know if you're going to talk about that later, but that's probably something that my colleagues would all like to talk about is, this is a big area of risk right now. And in the US, we're seeing that a lot because a lot of, red team or hackers, elite hackers are finding that, you know what, if I can't get into this hardened infrastructure that has this super resilience, right? What's the best way to get in? Through a vendor. Find out what tools they're using, what software they're using, and go through those avenues and exploit those. So we've seen that done several times already. And that's probably going to grow, I think, because going through the supply chain to get to somebody is pretty smart, actually. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess I want to turn back to you, Archie, in a second. But Marco, since you're kind of our cloud expert on the panel, everyone is, but you have the particular expertise in that. Is there any risk mitigation to be gained there in terms of not having to give all your data over to a vendor and risk having that data disappear out of someone else's attack surface that you don't control?
Well, the only real way to protect yourself is encryption, right? So if you have data that you don't want to share with the provider, where you don't want the provider to be able to access that data in any kind of format, then you create client-side encryption. You encrypt everything before you send it to the cloud, and then they'll need a supercomputer and 10,000 years to decrypt that content, right? But essentially, you should be doing that on premises anyway, right? There was a famous hack happened here in Canada. Life Labs is a testing facility that does testing for 3/4 of, I think, Ontario, and they got hacked and they got encrypted, right? Their data got encrypted, and this is a company that has health records. They have access to like very, very confidential patient information, and there was an interview with the CEO on CBC, and they were asked a question: was the data encrypted? Several times, where finally they said, I don't know, right? So that's something that we need to fix, the culture of not encrypting, right? Everybody says, oh, you give data to your provider. No, you don't, because it's encrypted. It doesn't matter where you store it when it's encrypted. I can store it on my phone, I can store it on my computer, and it's still potentially accessible if the device is connected to the internet. There's a potential for a 0-day vulnerability on my computer, on my phone, on my server, on my storage platform, and it's accessible, right? And thinking that, oh, we're giving the data to the providers so they'll do anything they want with it. Yeah, I mean, if you're using a software as a service platform, like you're using your Gmail, right? You're using your Google Documents where you're dropping your documents, and then they can potentially go and scan them and look what's inside, right? But if that document's encrypted, then this is a moot point completely.
So it's so interesting because, Mark, it sounded like you were kind of saying that encryption actually increases the risk in some way because you lose visibility to the data that's going to the end user. Am I getting that wrong? Is there kind of a...
No, you got it right. So there's kind of, if you look at it from 3 layers, so my colleague Marco was talking about encrypting the actual data, like in the database.
Right.
What I was talking about is the stream of data that's coming across through the ingress or egress coming in or leaving the organization at that time when it's encrypted before it gets to the database, right? So it has to cross probably the public network, the internet. That data is encrypted, and that data can't be seen. So encryption is used for a good purpose to protect it on the public network. But when it comes through your firewall and through your appliances, your security appliances, they can't read it either. In some cases, not in all cases. In some cases, some organizations, some vendors, I won't mention any, will claim to decrypt, but they don't have any evidence of how much they encrypt and decrypt. So if you ask them, show me a list of the files that came through the firewall and show me how many you decrypted, they'll say, no, I can't do that, right? Because they can only have some success at that. But I guess the point that I was trying to get to really, because we are talking about how AI can be used for cybersecurity, is AI is going to have the capability, the intelligence of being able to decrypt the data, or else what good can it do? It can't read it, so it doesn't know what it is, right? So it's going to have to be able to encrypt it, and then it's also going to have to be able to not just to decrypt it, but encrypt it again. Pardon me, I got confused there. Because the trick is here is because when you send it from somebody, there's a level of trust that you have with the data that you receive, because when you open it up, it's been signed, or it's a certificate that's been authorized by that company, right? However, if it's been opened up and then re-encrypted, the certificate will change, right? Because obviously the person who sent it isn't going to share their certificate with the AI or whatever the device is that's going to be doing the decrypting and the inspection, and then possibly re-encrypting it and sending it on its journey to the target, so that they don't, detect that it's been opened and looked at, right? I have that capability of being able to do encryption and decryption and not be detected while it's inspecting, doing that deep packet inspection. That'll be interesting to see.
It's a little terrifying because to the extent that we can use these resources, so can the attackers, right? If you can use AI to decrypt everything, then you're basically foiled encryption, and we got to look to another level of encryption. Like how much further do we need to go? Marco, thoughts?
Well, I mean, yeah, if we have them, then the attacker has them, and they know what we have. So it's a cat and mouse game, right? This is the real sort of philosophical question, right? How far do we develop this? How much effort do we put into these advanced approaches? Like, for example, deep packet inspection, like Mark mentioned. Yeah, of course, you can look at the contents, right? When are the contents important, right? That's the real question, right? Do I need to look at the contents when I'm talking to somebody publicly, or do I need to look at the contents when it's private content, like some internal stuff inside of my business, right? If it's internal stuff inside of my business, I can do man-in-the-middle attacks all the time, decrypt everything, inspect it, re-encrypt it, we're good. If it's communicating with external parties, right, then at some point I'm going to have to decrypt that request to understand it, right? So I'm going to have to receive that request, decrypt it, and at the point of decryption, I can say, okay, this is going to get inspected now, right? So the thing about implementing AI, it's not like a typical traditional IPS IDS device where it's one inline device. You do deep packet inspection on all the traffic, and then you figure out, yeah, it's good or no. The thing about AI-powered security is it has to be in all places. Anywhere where data gets decrypted, that's where it needs to sit. That's where it needs to be. It's a distributed environment, right? And this is where the complexity comes in, like the front end of the application, right? So how many places do we terminate this connection at, right? It could be hundreds of servers and hundreds of endpoints and hundreds of applications. And now that we're building microservices, it's thousands or tens of thousands. And then you ask yourself, is this really necessary? Do I really need to look at the internal contents? Because what you can do with ML-powered solutions with AI is you can look at the metadata, you can look at the connections, you can look at how frequently those connections happen, you can look at the sources and the targets. And even if the data is encrypted and I'm not looking inside it, I can still start looking at, oh, this is an unusual connection. ML will find that correlation between that metadata of just the connections and how often they happen, and give us some kind of prediction whether that is fraud or not, right? And this is what ML does. ML gives predictions, right? You essentially take data and you predict, yeah, looks good, this doesn't look good. And then on top of those predictions, you need to build your AI and say, yes, this is how we're going to respond, and then build your response procedures, right? And if we come back to that question of emails, right? Traditionally, we had a Bayesian approach of getting a model just good enough to sort of stop 90% of the emails coming through, right? So then the attacker goes and sees, oh, this is how the Bayesian model works. This is how we can beat it, right? And this will happen with AI, right? I'm going to build a prediction model with ML, the attacker is going to find that prediction model. They're going to, try everything to go around it. And this is something that we can do with an ML model that we cannot do with a Bayesian model, is continuously improve it over time. As more data is received, as more patterns are matched, then we can really narrow in into what the true positives and true negatives for a certain prediction are, right? We're going to be reducing the false negatives and the false positives. We're always going to have some false negatives and some false positives. The question is, which ones do you want to have? Do you want to have more? Do you want to have a balance and the lowest error possible? Do you want to have a little more false negatives? Do you want to have a little more false positives? For example, fraud detection in credit cards, right? If you're looking at how to optimize that model, you're going to go to more false positives, right? Because you don't want to have false negatives. You don't want to say, oh, this isn't fraud, but it actually was, right? You want to stop as much as possible. You want to say, okay, even if that credit card was used at this gas station and then at some online store, because it's a different postal code, does that mean it's fraud? Well, maybe it is, right? And you're just going to alert. You're going to put somebody, you're going to put a human in place who's going to call the customer, say, hi, did you make this purchase? This is a weird transaction, right? And then over time, again, you're going to tune that model with that feedback and say, okay, this looks like a valid transaction. And these models are going to get better and better and better. And even that false positive will then be reduced over time, right? But it's going to be an ongoing process. The cat and mouse game is never going to stop.
That's where we all live, right? And my practice is particularly focused on human error. And when people do the wrong things on purpose, so either on purpose or negligently, Artie, turning back to you, what are your thoughts, or what have you seen in terms of the ability that we currently have or may in the future have to use machine AI to try to address that significant and ever-present vector of human wrongdoing or misfeasance?
There's something wrong with my connection, so I can't hear clearly.
Can you hear me? Does that help if I speak louder?
It's breaking up, so there's something wrong.
Sorry about that. Okay, well, maybe
but I'm catching it.
Sure thing. So I'm interested in your thoughts about the human error and human malfeasance and how AI and ML might be able to help us in that particular risk and mitigating that risk.
Okay, I think I captured the question. To your point, yes, there's always going to be the human error, right? And combining it with machine learning helps improve it. Again, I think from what I heard a little bit from Marco, is we're still going to get the false positives or false negatives, right? But combining the two, we can actually improve where we are today. At the end of the day, like back to what I mentioned earlier on, is that we're still trying to play catch up. And if there's any small improvement that we can add by combining something that can help us be efficient or faster or speed up that process is helping us narrow us against the attackers.
Great. And I just put a question for you in the chat, so maybe I can ask you questions that way if you can't hear. I don't know if you were able to see that in the discuss function. So turning back to Mark while we're hoping to get that straightened out. Mark, you had mentioned supply chain. So I want to turn back to that because that's obviously on everybody's lips, right? When we can't get the products we want to get and we see attacks increasingly happening on critical infrastructure, kind of give us more on that risk and how we might be able to mitigate it and thinking about these tech solutions.
Yeah, supply chain is a big deal for some companies. Other companies have a better handle on it, but certainly, if you take a traditional approach, you go through your business continuity plan and you identify who are your critical suppliers, right? Then you go around the office and ask the managers who have they signed agreements with, right? So you get a better handle on it. But at some point, you're going to have to evaluate these systems. In one of my roles as an associate director with Morgan Stanley, I led 130 cybersecurity professionals based in New York and Halifax and in India And some of the jobs of these people, 16 architects in one of my groups, all we did was we reviewed Morgan Stanley's supply chain. So they have over 4,000 suppliers, and we reviewed their security architecture. So we took a security architecture approach. We reviewed their standards against our standards to make sure that they were compliant. And there's nothing stopping us from adding any requirements for machine learning or artificial intelligence into that architecture to make it even more efficient. I think like Artie and Marco were talking about, the more that we can reduce the false positives and concentrate on the improvements that can be made with AI in cybersecurity, the better off we all will be. The supply chain, though, is a particularly area where we're extremely vulnerable because first it starts in an area that you're very familiar with, and that's contracts, right? If you don't have the right, master service agreement and the proper schedules that ensure that your vendors are going to follow, a risk management approach to dealing with cybersecurity threats, that you would follow the same approach, including reporting and treating any sort of incidents, then what kind of confidence are you going to have? So you need to have it in the contract language to begin with after you identify who they are. And then you need to start reviewing them, maybe with a security architecture kind of approach that we used at Morgan Stanley, which was, to review the very details of the standards and how they applied it and look for the evidence. So we're not just it's not a survey. It's not like a one-way kind of traffic where they get to answer the survey and send it in to us and then we're okay. No, it doesn't work that way, right? We want to see it. You have to log us into your system and show us how it works, right? So we want to make sure. And of course, when you're Morgan Stanley and you're a Fortune 50 company, you can do anything you want to do almost and get away with it, right? But the smaller businesses are not going to be able to do that, especially if you have, if you're a small business and you rely on someone like Salesforce.com or SAP or one of those companies, because they have clouds, right? And when you go to their legal team, as you know, probably, they're going to look at you and say, really, you're like this big and we have customers that are this big and you are going to tell us how to change our business. Okay. So it's going to be quite an ongoing battle, and maybe AI will be able to shed some light on the legal aspect of it. So how we can make these agreements more effective and get people to buy into them.
Exactly. Marco, can you talk to us a little bit about testing and auditing, and how do we make sure that the ML solutions, the AI solutions that we want to use are actually working? And this is, I guess, red teaming, right? But talk us through that. Like, how do we make sure this is not going to end up?
Well, yeah, I completely agree here with Mark that, corporate policies are going to be the thing that's going to help us define these standards. There are, of course, approaches to testing your platform and evaluating the performance of that platform, right? So the first thing you need to think about is just the pure ML evaluations. How's the ML model performing? You're going to have to capture a lot of test data. You're going to have to capture a lot of evaluation data for that model. And of course, verify whether whether it's not skewed toward whatever was found in the training data. The machine learning evaluations, they're always dependent on how much fitting did you do to the training data, right? Is the training data skewed in one direction? And again, this needs to be put into a policy. This needs to be put in place saying, we need a certain volume of data to be able to test the performance of our model. You're going to also include traditional approaches, right? You're going to do traditional vulnerability checking, just, schedule vulnerability scans. You're going to look at false positives, right? First thing that you do whenever you create a false positive, whenever AI creates false positives, is mark it as a false positive, right? You can do evaluation logic. So basically you've got all your negatives on one side, all your positive on one side, and then the curves kind of merge at some point, right? And this is where you get into the false negative, false positive territory. It was an attack, but we marked it as not, or it wasn't an attack, but we marked it as an attack. And whenever you do mark it, whenever AI does mark it, you need to start building a database of all the falses, right? So that you can always put an evaluation on top of that one and then reevaluate. Okay, would the new model, would the new approach, would the new application or service or whatever the provider is giving us actually identify those the same, right? Are we improving it at all? So one of the real drivers of the ability to analyze this data is just the capacity, the cheap, massive capacities of storage that are available right now, right? We haven't had a historical moment where most of your disk capacity, most of your storage capacity that is inside of your enterprise, it's inside of your computer, even inside of your phone, most of that capacity is unused right now, right? And we need to utilize that capacity to store this historical data and gather as much historical data as possible, and then do continuous reevaluation. But yeah, it's always up to the policy. What is the goal? What are we trying to achieve? And that's going to be where our job is going to be, right? Thinking about what is the goal? How do we evaluate? Which ML approaches to put in place? How is the AI going to make the decision? Where is the decision making going to be stored, right? So those are things that need to be put in place for any business that's putting in ML or AI.
Continuous testing. And I guess that actually raises a good question that I want to put back to Artie, because you live in the space of ethical hackers constantly trying to find the vulnerabilities. Are we potentially walking into a trap here with becoming reliant on ML and AI tools that could potentially be taken over and used against us? Is that a risk that you see given where you live?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is the attackers are using AI to launch attacks. AI can mimic trusted individuals, right? I was just speaking to the founder at Observe ID just to hear his thoughts as well. And what he shared was the risk he was seeing is AI or ML can be used to create out of fake messages that look like real messages, or can be used to spam by constantly changing email addresses where the message is coming from. And then I was speaking to somebody else who talked about a recent talk that they had attended, which is AI to defeat AI. I mean, at the end of the day, right, what we say is having the combination, right? You can't be 100% adoption, right? You still need humans. And as companies start implementing, or cybersecurity organizations start implementing this, you start thinking of ways of how you're implementing this successfully by using what we call the crawl, walk, run approach, starting off with small scale, learning it before we continuously keep expanding it further into our own internal product line or space or systems.
That's really helpful. So we've got only 3 minutes left, which is perfect. I want to do a quick lightning round. I'll start with you, Mark. Give us your parting words. Like, what are the few points you would like to leave the audience with about this issue, how AI is transforming the future of cybersecurity? Couple quick points to leave everyone with.
Well, I think there's a huge upside to leveraging artificial intelligence when it really is artificial intelligence, and the potential to reduce a lot of the day-to-day type of activities and apply some more historical type of analysis and intelligence. So I think the future is bright. I think we need to walk carefully and plan ahead, because there's also a huge downside potential to AI.
And Marco, give us your thoughts. What are your parting kind of big picture points to leave the audience with?
AI is mature at this point for cybersecurity, definitely. There are services, there are providers, there are startups that are doing, massively amazing things. Start by looking at educating yourself on the basics, ML, AI, what it even is. And then, of course, you're going to be able to evaluate these solutions much, much better when you have some baseline understanding. This is a new field. There's nobody who's an expert, right? We're all still learning. So nothing wrong with that.
And I've learned so much in this hour. Artie, bring us home. What are your parting thoughts?
No, I totally echo and agree with Mark and Marco. My audio's back better now, but I totally agree with them. What is the future and what is the potential that we can leverage? And if we're leveraging it in the right way, accordingly, there's a lot of benefits, but we just need to figure that out as we work on implementing this. We need to look at how do we remove bias, for example. There's so many other pieces that we just need to still look at. But yes, I do agree with both of them that there is huge potential in the future.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for helping educate me and everyone else who's watching this. And I don't know, Natine, I haven't seen any questions come around, but if I've missed any, let us know. And otherwise, we can conclude.
Sure, Jessica. Thank you. I think it was a lovely panel discussion, I'll tell you. Lovely. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. The way Jessica conducted the panel discussion, the way questions were asked, and the way Mark, Marco, and Aarti answered. I think it was amazing. So I'm just waiting if any questions are there, guys. You have 30 seconds. If you want to put your questions, you can put it right away. Or you can always connect with Jessica, Mark, Marco, Aarti on LinkedIn. They are active on LinkedIn, and they will obviously be happy to help more into this topic like cybersecurity and the threats and how to overcome it, or anything which you want to ask them. Please feel free to connect to them. So just to wrap up, in case anybody wants to ask questions, they can put it in the Q&A section. So I'll just put my parting thoughts so that it can leave you all with the best things, what you can expect from us. So we would like to thank our technology partner, Digit7, all our community partners, speakers, and the attendees who came together to achieve knowledge through this forum. I think it was really interesting from all the panel members, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm sure everybody enjoyed it as well. Please log on to our website, that is aiCoursePod.io, and like the social media channels. We'll be sharing lots of knowledge-sharing topics, details, announcement of next events, and much more, I think, which will help you register for the events and attend the same. Just for your information, today's event was broadcasted live in the Facebook and YouTube channel of our company, so you all can go and see the recording anytime in the near future as well. There are lots more in store for subsequent months as well, with focus on telecom, IoT, blockchain, retail, e-commerce, healthcare, banking, and so on. Wherever AI is there, we are there. So request all of you to keep connected with us and enjoy the learning. Thank you all. Thank you all the great speakers for taking your time and sharing the thoughts. Hope you all have a lovely day and a lovely weekend ahead. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.